I'm so excited today, like even more excited than usual, if you can believe it. Because I have my partners in compliance, I was about to say something, but I was going to call y'all my duo, the Reds. Many of you might recognize these lovely ladies. They're known as the Reds of ChiroHealthUSA, and they work with doctors all over the country, thousands and thousands of practices, helping them to make sure that they have compliant fee schedules in place. But one of the topics of conversation that we have yet to address is, well, exactly how do you determine what you should be charging anyway? So I would like to introduce, for those of you who do not know them, Miss Mandy Curry and Heather Simmons. Both of them. So Mandy, you've been with us, what, like 5 or 6 years now?
6 years in January.
Woohoo! Yeah. And she is the first person that, and 9 times out of 10, that you're going to talk to when you are just curious about what you should or shouldn't be doing in practice, and whether or not you even need ChiroHealthUSA. Mandy's going to be like, hey, you don't need us. You're doing everything right. What's up, Evan? And then we have Heather, who's been here for 8 years. Mm-hmm. And she has, well, she's done like every job that we have. And actually, so is Mandy. But Heather's primary responsibility is to get down into the nitty gritty of what is going on in your practice. So we're going to talk about some I'm going to ask them some questions about how they help doctors around the country. And just know that, yeah, we all work for ChiroHealthUSA. We might talk about ChiroHealthUSA, but this is in no way to talk you into using ChiroHealthUSA, because if you don't need us, you don't need us. And that's perfectly great. And I love that Evan's on here. So let's start off with I'm trying to think of like the best question. I guess it really is, before we got started today, we were talking about the conversations that take place and how, like, what is your actual fee? And Mandy, share with everybody what you told me when we were talking about this.
Well, believe it or not, guys, there are a lot of conversations that I have with clinics on the front end just to basically assess, to Christy's point, whether ChiroHealthUSA is needed in your practice and where it could possibly fit in to benefit your practice or your patients. But as I'm having this conversation, what I've come across more so than less is that clinics actually don't know the term actual fee, because I will ask them what their actual fee is. And they'll say, well, are you referring to what insurance pays, or are you referring to what we charge our cash patient? No. What is your fee without any discount or reduction, period? And they don't know, quite frankly.
No, and I do remember that too from years ago when I did help practices with their fees. And so usually that's like, what is the highest fee that you charge in your office? It's like where we start. Mm-hmm. And then it comes down to, are you sure that what you're charging is what you should be charging? Are you charging market rate? Do you even know how to determine what that is? And why is that really so important? Like knowing if they're even charging like fair market value.
Well, it's crucial. I mean, it's crucial on behalf of the profession. Yeah, the profession in itself, because if you're not placing value on quite frankly, the miracle work that chiropractors do, then that's going to lessen the reimbursements. Mm-hmm. It's also going to take away that what the patient values it as. Perception. So, yeah, the perception of it and the quality that they think. So it's, it's like, do you want the dollar menu, or would you like a nice healthy meal? Which one are you going to pay more for?
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I think back 8 years ago when I started this with CHUSA, and one of the things we would always look at was Medicare, that Medicare allowable, and checking that rate, and, doctors not discounting below that necessarily. And what I've seen change over the years is that Medicare is paying more for an adjustment than insurance. And they used to be the lowest on the totem pole when it came to reimbursement. And now in many areas, they're paying well above what insurance is reimbursing for a 9894041.
I've seen several of them. Most recently, the one I can think of is a specific insurance company renegotiated their contract with this clinic, and they were going to reimburse them $8.73.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
Which is definitely less than their cost to do business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But if we keep taking our fee for service, what we are charging, our actual fee, your retail fee, if we keep lowering that on the side that insurance isn't going to pay me this. Well, no, they're going to continue, to Mandy's point, they're going to continue to lower your reimbursement because, well, you're only valuing that service at $17.
Right. Which is less than the cost to get your nails done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which breaks my heart in so many ways. So speaking of the cost of doing business, I know, Heather, this is kind of an exercise that you do with doctors, and you ask them how much do you have to make just to break even, and how often does a doctor and staff even know the answer to that question?
I'll say, do you know your number? Well, what do you mean? What do you mean by number? What number? Do you know what it costs to actually have that patient book and be seen and to treat that patient? What is your number? What is your cost of doing business? And I mean, there's so many stories. I think Mandy and I could tell you, the whole team here at ChiroHealthUSA could tell you that practices don't have a clue what their overhead is. And I think that's, to run a good business, first and foremost, you really need to know what your numbers are, period. But you want to make sure that you're being profitable when you're seeing those patients. That way you're not discounting even your cash fee. I mean, on average, we see clinics do a 50% cash fee.
Sometimes
not with ChiroHealthUSA, but just in general.
Sometimes up to 60-70%.
And then you find out that, well, you're only making 66 cents every time you saw that patient.
Well, so I'm glad you brought up 66 cents, because this is legitimately what happened. I have a very close friend who called me one day. Well, really, I say called me one day. He called me a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, and said that his practice had never been busier. He was seeing more patients than ever before, but the numbers just weren't working out because he was making less revenue for his practice. He could not figure out for the life of him what was going on. And I was like, okay, well, that doesn't really make sense. And I did ask him, I was like, well, what is your cost of doing business? And he's like, what are you talking about? See, this is like, it's terrible because like even our own friends don't even listen sometimes when we're talking to them. And which is sad because I've talked about this twice when I'm sitting in the front row of my class. But and I'm here. I'm not saying your name, but so I actually connected him with Heather via email, and I was like, Heather, you've got to help him because like I don't understand what's going on. And that's what happened when you helped him with this cost of doing business. He was making 66 cents a visit.
66 cents, 0.66 cents
a visit, which means covering his overhead and making 66 cents. And you know what you do is such a hands-on profession. I mean, you're physically adjusting people's spines, and like, are you taking care of yourself? Because like, how long are you going to be able to do that? And it's worth more than 66 cents.
Yeah.
Profitability. Like, how are you going to grow?
Right.
Making 66 cents. And so, I love that. And so that's actually the first step y'all take with them to help them to determine where their actual fees are. And I'm just going to say this too, as a disclaimer. We never, Heather and Mandy, they don't tell you what your fee should be, but what they do is guide you with the resources so that you can determine what your fee should be. And that's a decision that you make. With consultants, because in some cases, some of these are multidisciplinary practices or they're very specialized. And so we will refer them out to consultants to help them with this process. And even the consultants never tell you what your fee should be. They just guide you down that path. So that's step one. So what would be the next thing that they would need to look at to help them determine what their fee should be?
Yeah, I think knowing your number is kind of the first question. We like to make our process super simple with ChiroHealth if in fact they get through Mandy and they do need ChiroHealthUSA. But I mean, to your point, I want to just state this again. We work with some incredible consultants where if we need a little bit more help, and if there's a little bit more layers to what it is that you've got going on, then we work with some phenomenal people within the profession to say, all right, hey, and that's a complimentary thing that we do just to make sure you're set up for success. Because ultimately that's what we're here for, is for the profession, to make sure everyone is being profitable within chiropractic, because it can happen. You just have to have good business sense sometimes, or just a reminder of compliant ways to do business. So we're happy to introduce you to different people. And we've got, it's fun, the stories that we have with a lot of our docs who didn't know that they could have the conversation with someone to really help them with the business side of things. So once they kind of get through Mandy, if they get to me, what's your number? I want to know, do you know what your number is? And that's critical. And we've got an overhead calculator sheet anybody can use. Just ask us, we'll get it to you. I think and it's simple numbers, so it does the calculations for you. So that's the most relevant thing that you could do. And then you want to look at your actual fees.
Well, I'm putting it up here right now, but I did put the link in the chat box so people could go to it, and it tells you exactly how to get those numbers.
It just takes a few minutes. I do tell a lot of my practices when we have this conversation, there's no harm in looking every quarter, every 6 months, for sure every year. Yeah, for sure every year you should be looking at this. But there's no harm, in my opinion, visiting this just to make sure, because things change.
Well, so I could give you several examples of clinics that I've had that front end conversation with, and if I've asked them the question, when's the last time you've looked at your actual fees? Oh, well, it was probably 1984 when I opened my practice. Right. Okay, well, what did you pay for gas back then?
Right.
What are you paying now? So it's like everything else. Prices have gone up on everything. So you have to adapt again and take that mentality of, again, putting the value on the service.
Mm-hmm.
So
I love that you said that, because I didn't even think, because I always ask that question. How many people in the room have actually looked at or evaluated their fees in the last 5 years, and maybe one hand and 200 raise their hand, and then they will also, more often than not, it's been 10 or more years in my experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or they assume, let's just say that they bought the practice from Dr. Smith. And so they assume theirs. I had one that had 4 decades
mm-hmm.
of actual different fees based off of their age. That was their actual fees.
It was. And that's the craziest thing. But you can't just stop there. So that tells you your bottom line number. And I will say that the average overhead in a chiropractic office is somewhere between 45 and 50%. So let's just say it's $27. So you have to make $27 to just break even. Pay your staff, to pay yourself, to pay your expenses, and this is making zero profit. And if you're my friend, it's $27.66. So it's making. So, and the next thing would you recommend, and that's when you have to start reviewing your provider contract.
Yeah, the provider contracts. Yeah. We always check your provider contracts. Look at those.
My favorite, I always ask this too in a room. It's like, how many of you read those contracts before you signed them? Nobody raises their hand. Occasionally one person raises their hand. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to sound like your mama for a second. Don't you ever sign anything without reading it first?
I tell them, do not make me use my mom voice.
Right? Because how many of us have signed something without reading it?
We always check the terms and agreement. They're like, yeah, nobody's going to mess us over.
Let's go. That's a lot of, and more so here recently, I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of doctors that are just opening their own practice. And so they're in the process of getting a network with these different insurances. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to give you a little word of advice here. And this goes back to, again, setting those actual fees. I'm like, if you set these actual fees at this low rate, guess what insurance is going to reimburse you? Why should they reimburse you more than that? They're going to lowball you is the best way I can say it.
True story.
So I always tell them to pay attention to what they're looking at. And, don't just be, what's the word, submissive to the insurance. Ask questions. I mean, you're signing a contract with these people, so ask questions.
And if you think they don't know what you're charging your practice, they do. They know more about your practice than you do.
Yep.
And so you definitely want to make sure that you're not charging below market rate. And the other interesting thing is that, y'all get these notifications, these emails from insurance companies that you're in network with pretty regularly. They're always like, sometimes like 40 or 50 pages long, and rarely does it ever address anything with chiropractic. You just kind of get in the habit of like not looking at them. And I cannot impress upon you enough. It's usually in a PDF or on a website. Do Control F, Command F, and hit chiropractic and look and make sure. So a couple of years ago, United Healthcare sent out one of those notifications. It was in like June, that said that as of like September 1st, they would no longer cover chiropractic adjustments for the treatment of headache. And nobody read this thing. Nobody saw it for the most part. Like a handful of people did. They notified their state association. And they notified the clinical compass. They notified the ACA and ICA. But when I say like barely anybody noticed, the whole situation was resolved. And that was when that was promoted and pushed out. That was the first time anybody knew that could have impacted their practice. Because 9 times out of 10, these things go into effect. They count on the fact that you're not going to look at it. And next thing you know, it's like 90 days and you're just like, wait a minute, what are all these denials? Why are these claims not getting paid? And you find out about it after, you've gone 90 days without collecting any money. Luckily, because with the help of the clinical compass and the ACA, the ICA, the state associations, the ADCA, they were able to have it overturned. They sent a letter to the United Healthcare president, and they actually overturned it a month later before it ever went into effect. So no chiropractor lost money. And so you want to make sure that you, the person who does your billing and insurance, is reading those, and because insurance contracts change. What changes? They might have been paying for modalities or therapeutic exercise, and now they don't. Or they will in some circumstances, but they don't. Or now there's bundling issues and all of these things that are impacting your reimbursement. And a lot of times there's a very small window of time that you can actually get out of those contracts if they're no longer financially beneficial. And I think that's something important. You have to be able to know that you don't have to be a network.
Nope.
You can be an out-of-network provider for these insurance companies. And some of them pay really, really well, and some of them don't. So be able to negotiate that and try to negotiate your fees. You can actually try to negotiate with them to get a higher reimbursement amount. A lot of chiropractors don't do that, but in the rest of healthcare, they do it all the time. Mm-hmm. So you just want to make sure that you know those numbers, that you're keeping up with those updates, and you're not finding out about it after you've not collected thousands of dollars over a 90-day period.
I had a clinic, particularly, they had not reviewed, and I'm speaking about one particular insurance, they had not reviewed their contract with them in years. I mean, had not reimbursement, that whole thing. And so put some changes in effect, reviewed that contract, everything was updated. They started kind of going back and calculating, and month over month, they were leaving on the table over $3,000 for one service that they could have been collecting more. $3,000 a month was left on the table because they neglected to review their contract.
And I will add too,
that's big money. I mean, that's make or break it for most clinics sometimes.
Yeah. It is. And I was going to say, so one of the things too in this process, obviously we have reviewed thousands of fee schedules over the years. And what's interesting is that, like in Florida and Texas alone, when we did that compiling of here's what kind of like the market values were, and we also looked at workers' comp, that 80% of the providers were paying less than what workers' comp would pay them.
Yep.
And in a lot of states, workers' comp actually is like the highest fee schedule. Even if you don't see a lot of workers' comp patients.
It's the fee schedule.
Yeah.
It's public information.
Yeah.
Right. And you should include that when you're determining that cost of doing business. So interestingly enough, I work very closely with state associations, and 2 of my state associations right now are fighting tooth and nail to prevent workers' comp from lowering the reimbursement rate on the workers' comp fee schedule, because almost all of the providers in their state don't even charge what workers' comp allows.
Right.
So think about this. And again, remember, I'm using general made up numbers. This is not a recommendation for what you should or could be charging in practice. But if workers' comp would pay you $100 for a 98940, now they know I'm making this up, but workers' comp is going to pay you $100 for a 98940, and you charge 70. Are they going to pay you 70? Or are they going to pay you 100? They're going to pay you 70. And that's $30 that you lost out on, because again, you're not even charging what is allowed in your state. So if you have a workers' comp published fee schedule or a PI published fee schedule, you need to pull those and have those included in a spreadsheet when you're evaluating your fees, and the reimbursement amounts for all of your in-network provider contracts.
Right.
Yeah.
What about Medicare? Medicare is about to take a pay cut starting in 2021. So depending on who you talk to, it's anywhere from 10 to 20%. And again, you know, state associations right now are trying to get their members to help them and to fight the legislation and the changes that are going to take place and hit our chiropractors, because Lord knows our Medicare patients love chiropractic and they deserve to have access to it. Okay, that's me off my horse for a second. But what else do you suggest that they look at resource-wise to help them figure out what the market rate is in the area?
There are a couple of websites out there that you could independently look at. Fairhealthconsumer.org is one. It's a bit more thorough. I would recommend fairhealthconsumer.org for probably a multi-D kind of practice, because it's not exclusive to chiropractic. Let me say that. It does unfortunately limit you to 20 searches a week per IP address, but you could independently search CPT codes in network, out of network. It really gives you a lot of information, but it's a bit more tedious. So more the multi-D side of things, I would definitely, recommend looking at this particular site. Again, it limits you to 20 searches per IP address though. So sometimes you have to get creative.
You have to focus.
Because somebody accidentally went in here, because I was doing it for one of our clinics, our actual clinic, that and I started with X-ray codes. So it's a terrible idea.
X-ray codes are the last codes that you look for, or you get those on your cell phone. That way you turn your Wi-Fi off. But X-ray codes are the last ones. But I mean, it is useful. It is useful. It's not my personal favorite.
It is not. But speaking of your personal favorite,
my personal favorite, hands down, 100% of the time, is absolutely ChiroCode.com. And if you guys don't know about this, you're welcome.
Yep.
Yes. So you literally input your zip code and you hit create the worksheet. Yeah. And this is fantastic. And this is a great resource. In fact, for like a minute, it was your favorite, and then they took it down.
And I cried.
It was down, like a week, maybe.
About a week. I was like, oh no.
It felt like 6 or 8 months, but it was only about a week.
It's absolutely useful, because it pre-populates all of the codes, so you don't independently have to search for them, and it gives you your guidelines here, and it's amazing how many clinics just don't know the resources that are out there. I mean, why aren't you on the phone with your state association? I mean, you guys have so many resources out there to get to these things beyond ChiroHealthUSA, but this by far is for sure is for sure my favorite.
I agree with Heather. This is one that I highly suggest, whether it's a clinic, again, that's been open for 30 plus years, or if you're a brand new doctor and just opening your own practice. This is the go-to.
Yeah.
I mean, because it does it for you, lays out your options, and basically it's just up to you what level you're comfortable with setting those actual fees at.
Yeah, it gives you a good measure, especially it's one of the things when I'm looking at the different fee schedules, and usually the things that tail off on them first are their E&M codes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I was like, you only, no joke, like the actual billable fee, what they're billing out, for a 99202 or 03. I see clinics, and these are the ones who haven't updated in years, or they're just like, well, I don't want to write it off.
Yeah.
But they're like $30, $55, when in reality, insurance is willing to pay more than that. And then they come and they look at this and they go, you mean to tell me that's what I should be charging for my area? I'm like, it's up to you. I'm not going to tell you what your actual fees are, but here's a resource that says it supports this fee for your area.
True
and
story.
Blown away. This is make it or break it.
Well, and again, you'll notice too that all of these searches are done based on your zip code.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because no two areas are the same.
No.
Really? I mean, obviously, we're not going to charge in Mississippi what they charge in New York or Beverly Hills. And if you're in a more rural area, that's going to be different than a more metro area. Let's just see. I only know this one off the top of my head because Beverly Hills 90210.
Yeah, that's always my search zip code if Chiro code goes down. I'm like, okay.
90210.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's so funny. So it does it by zip code. So you just want to make sure that you're doing that. And I knew that was her favorite fee schedule. So you want to make sure you pull your workers' comp for your state. Some of them are published, some of them are not. Mississippi, you have to purchase it. I'm trying to remember which one of these is.
What we need to be clear on too is, please don't call other chiropractic offices.
No. Do not call.
Don't shop.
Don't call your buddy or whether you know them or not. It doesn't matter. Don't call around and ask, what are you guys charging? Don't do that.
Well, for starters, it's illegal.
Yeah. So,
I know that they know what they're doing.
Well, I called about 3 offices around me, and this is what I found.
Or the best one I've heard is, well, I've called 3 or 4 offices around, and nobody would tell me. I don't know why they wouldn't talk to me about it. Because they're not supposed to. So, and plus that's not, I mean,
it's not a good measure.
As thorough as chiropractic is in itself, think about it like that.
Yeah.
You want the best of the best resource.
It's supportive information.
Yeah.
You want to be able to support why you said it. If it ever came down to, it's there.
Trust but verify.
And like I said, one of the options that we have, we introduced Chiro code to you, fairhealthconsumer.org. We'll recommend, your PI workers' comp. And if above that you need a bit more detailed help, we do have resources that we say, all right, they may need a little more hand holding. Maybe they need someone to say, this is what you should be doing. And that's something that obviously we can't tell you to, even though sometimes we use our mom voice. But that's where we'll introduce you to some of our BFFs.
We generally, it depends. Most of the ones that need that little extra help, believe it or not, guys, there are chiropractors that, again, whether they've just graduated or maybe they were working as an associate in another practice for a while, they don't know what a CPT code is.
Oh.
So I'm like, okay, well, first we need to understand this before you can take any other steps.
Mm-hmm.
You have to use CPT codes. You have to. You need to know these. So I get it. You did You're not familiar with it, but guess what? I know a guy. He's going to help you out and explain exactly what they are. So that's when we'll kind of, provide those with, provide them with those resources that truly walk them through, okay, this is what a 98940 is. This is, and give them a great description of it so that they can really gauge, because a lot of them, it's a very eye-opening experience because they don't understand that if they've spent 30 minutes with a patient, they don't realize that they've maybe just done 4 or 5 different codes, depending on what's going on with that patient within 30 minutes. Like, yes, you did all this stuff. So you need to get paid for it.
So can we talk to you a little bit about, so one of the biggest reasons that we have these doctors that you're working with that have not updated their fees in 5+ years if ever, is the issue is you find that they're real hesitant to increase their fee.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
My patients can't afford it.
My patients will leave.
Yeah.
Okay.
My area, my demographic, we're blue collar, and no one will ever pay that.
Yeah.
Okay. And I love that because people will tell me that too when we talk about it in class, when we talk about demographics. And this is the great thing about software is that it will tell you what your demographics are.
Right.
So before you start making decisions based on your demographics, it's really important to look and know exactly what your demographics are. I had one in Kentucky speaking. We had somebody in the audience who told me that she felt that more than half of her demographic were cash pay, like self-pay patients.
Mm-hmm.
That is precisely why she had never updated her fees. They were the same fees that had been in place since she had purchased the practice over 10 years ago. And I was like, do you think that or do you know it? And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, who is self-pay, who is insurance, whatever. I mean, yes, there are things inside of your EHR that tell you if they have insurance or not, but you just don't really know in many cases. And you need to know because you have software that will tell you what the demographic is, like what percent is PI, what percent is workers' comp, what is in-network insurance, what is Medicare, all of these things. And you might be making decisions on the financial stability of your practice that are not well informed because you don't really know. And in her case, what she found out was she was charging about half of what workers' comp allowed in her state. She said she didn't do a lot of workers' comp, but come to find out she had lost hundreds of thousands of dollars over the time that she had been owning the practice because she was charging so little and actually did more workers' comp than she realized.
Yep. Yeah. You should never assume that your patients can't afford your services. You should never make that assumption. You should never assume because they're Medicare that they are broke. I mean, this is a completely different. I mean, when you speak about, what's in someone's bank, you don't know. I had a particular clinic, Midwest area.
Yeah.
New patient came in and started haggling this doctor about how much he could afford to pay. And so the doc was just very adamant, this is what it is today. And after struggling with this patient to get the patient, to pay, they settled on $100. The man literally pulled out a wad of $100 bills from his pocket. Mm-hmm. By the way, the discussion was over $50.
Yeah.
That was the difference. So don't assume because the patient says that I can't afford to pay for it, that they truly can't afford to pay for your services.
Well, and I will say that, so when I started out some years ago, I started out in the practice. And I remember making the assumption based on first impressions when I first started about what I thought who could pay and who couldn't. And I always tell the story. So early in the morning, the practice wouldn't open until 7, but we would have people there at like 6:30, 6:45 to get in. And a lot of them were farmers who had driven quite a ways to kind of come into the practice and get adjusted. And they were in their work clothes, their old truck. They would come in, never missed an appointment, ever. And then we also had an attorney that would come in all the time, had always had a new car, very well-known, commercial billboards everywhere. He, all the time, was behind in billing to the point like it would get insane, and then he would get caught up, but it would go on, and you'd just be like, oh my gosh, this is an insane amount. Where like my farmers, they paid everything.
Right.
And never, I mean, and it didn't stop them. And the point is, your patients are not going to leave because you change the price. Everything, like they said before, has gone up in price. Like everything has gone up over the years. If you haven't updated your fee schedule in 3 years, in 10 years, there's a considerable difference in just the cost of living from years ago to now.
Yeah.
Huge. That's probably why they, the customary pay increase for a lot of employees around the country is 3%. It's a cost of living increase. You fair to middling, but you're doing just enough.
Yeah.
We're going to get the cost of living, right? So, like, my husband gets the cost of living, and then he gets a merit increase every year. So, think about that. And so we did this really interesting, just trying to figure out, what was the impact of just and a visit. And again, keeping in mind that a visit is not just, for many chiropractic offices, it's not just an exam. It's not just an adjustment. It's $5 a visit. So you're talking about an adjustment and some therapy, an exam, an x-ray, maybe an adjustment. Just $5 a visit. What was the financial impact it could have on a practice? Keep in mind, you can't even buy a Starbucks for $5.
Nope.
No.
I'm good with anyways.
Well, I was just gonna say when I started it was for the cost of Starbucks. No, we just were in Starbucks in Orlando, Florida. It was more than $5. But so $5 a visit. Now, I know a lot of y'all are probably like me and go to the coffee shop on a regular basis. I go every day.
Yeah, we did that math one time, and I got lots of trouble with Christy.
Yeah,
we did.
Might have told her husband how much she was spending. I was just trying to help him out.
she threw out a monthly total.
I have an allowance, and I'm allowed to spend it on whatever I want. If I spend $200 a month on coffee, then so be it.
Oh, but we digress. Anyways.
My point being is, however, I'd give up my coffee before I give up my adjustment. But $5 a visit has an impact on a practice. It's 13 months of revenue in a 12-month period of time. $5 a visit. $5. That could mean that you made no adjustments to some of your fees. You might have gone up $1, $1.50 on some of your fees. But an average of $5 a visit means you didn't treat any more people than you normally did.
Right.
You didn't work any more than you did the year before. But instead of collecting 12 months of revenue, you got the equivalent of 13 months of revenue in a 12-month period of time. What did that additional income, what kind of an impact would that have on your practice?
It's huge for practices.
Huge.
It is huge. And then how often, and that's the other thing, it's okay, then now once you do this, how often should you be evaluating your fees?
I think every year. It should be something this time of year now to set up the coming year. This is probably the best time of year. Practices tend to slow down a little bit because, Thanksgiving, Christmas, this is just the kind of flow. So this time of year for sure is where I would begin looking at my contracts, invest back into your business. And that's exactly what you're doing.
Because it goes back to that, Heather's, this time of year, but don't wait until the last week of December to do this. This should be things you should start thinking about doing your homework on right now so that you can, if you are going to make changes within your financial policies, things like that you're setting it up to go smoothly as of January 1st, if that's your goal date. But most people, it's January 1st. So, you make your resolution.
People expect change.
Change is always coming on January 1st.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we hope it is anyway. We don't always stick to our New Year's resolutions, but we have the best intentions. But
so, and then how do you tell your patients that you've increased the fee?
No.
And that's the thing, though. People, I think a lot of chiropractors, they tend to underestimate the understanding and the relationship between themselves and their patients.
First off, your patients trust you.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing, because a lot of you guys have patients that have been with you for years, probably since you opened your practice or last time you actually updated your actual fees. And these patients understand more. You got to give them more credit than you're giving them.
Yeah. And just in my experience, what I found too is that the patient cares just as much about the doctor as the doctor does about the patient. So they want you guys to be successful. They want to continue. Yeah, they want to continue to see you. They want their family to continue to see you. So they understand that you can't, I mean, as much as you'd love to, you can't just do this for free. You have to make a living. You have to be able to pay your staff. You have to be able to, if your goal is to, maybe we want to include some more therapies or hire some more people to do some, massage therapy or physical therapy, whatever the case is, that in order to do that, this is the way you have to do it. And so the patient is just as much invested in your practice as you are.
Yeah. Huge.
I love my chiropractor so much that I, who never drive on the interstate, get every Monday morning, drive 30 minutes on the interstate to go get my adjustment, and then drive 30 minutes to come back home because I love him and he moves his office.
You make mine sweat.
Yeah.
So
Get a good workout just in my neck. But, I want to say something a minute ago. You said something about leaving the money on the table, that additional $5. And that's essentially giving, that $5 is giving yourself a raise. Believe it or not, because that was money. You didn't change the pay, how many patients you were seeing. You weren't putting more on your plate. You made some tweaks. And that $5 is giving yourself a raise. I did that with a practice last week, and it was an additional $15. $15. And we had our moment, and I said, do you realize we didn't change anything? You actually just started collecting for your services. All you did, you were literally saying, here, this is free. Take all of this. And everything we did is super affordable, met their numbers, and they still gave themselves a $15 raise and didn't change much of anything.
So, and I want to bring that up too, because you just said my favorite 4-letter word, free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you ever hear anybody choose to say that it's an F word, we're talking about free, not the other one. Okay. It's that's our 4-letter word. It's a dirty word. It's free. And how many times do y'all see doctors that are giving away stuff for free?
All the time.
All the time.
That extremity adjustment.
Well, we don't charge for that. We don't charge for that.
Re-exam. I don't charge for a re-exam. I'm Heather. I'm already there adjusting them. Why am I going to ask Miss Betty to pay an extra fee for her knee, her ankle, her shoulder?
Why am I going to charge them for e-stim? I mean,
and then they're Medicare, and then they're Medicare patients, and that's a whole other webinar. But free is it makes us, or cash makes us cringe, but free for sure, because really. There's so much student loan debt within chiropractic right now. I mean, it's ridiculous. Why should anything be free?
When have you ever paired or compared the words free and valuable together?
Never.
Right.
Never. And it's interesting to me because we will talk to people and you always ask the question, are you offering discounts in your office? And I would say in almost every conversation, most of them tell you what?
No.
Then when you start talking about like free services, what you're giving away, it kind of blows my mind sometimes, like all the different stuff that is not being charged for in a practice. And
that's a compliance issue. That's a huge compliance issue.
Yeah. And you expose yourself to so much risk. Nothing in your office is free.
Nothing.
But again, going back to, like you mentioned, Christy, when I have that conversation with them, that's when I truly say, because a lot of them, I'll just be honest, they're not doing anything out of malicious intent. Right.
Oh, no, I know that.
Until you ask them that question and they really think about it, that's when they have their aha moment and they realize, oh, crap. But
I didn't realize that.
I didn't even think about that.
Well, and then I think the other thing is we like to call, and we sell this for Miles and Holly, but it's like a leaky bucket syndrome. Like you, all of a sudden, when you start thinking about, because things change over time, and you don't realize that, well, it just started off with an extremity. We're not going to charge for extremity testing. Then it's like we're going to do free stim, and then we're not going to charge for free exams, and we're not. And then all of a sudden, when you start to look at all of the services that you did, because it'll say right there on their fee schedule, you know, 98943, $0. Like
Right.
it just doesn't have a fee attached to it. You go back and you look at it and say, well, I mean, yeah, did, and I'm just pulling a number. You did 500 extremity adjustments. We know it's way more than that, but let's just say 500, right? And you could have charged $5 for those. That would have been $2,500. You gave away $2,500. Or you say, okay, guys, you did 500 re-exams, and you could have charged
20.
20?
Yeah.
$20. I mean, and that's $10,000. So then when you start just randomly picking, like, say, okay, we're just going to randomly pick prices and we're going to add it to this. And then based on your EHR, this is what you did. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute. Like, I'm struggling and I know I need to be paying myself more, but I can't. But I also gave away, you know, $50,000 in service.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it's even more than that.
Here's what I would say based off of everything that we're talking about right now. So, and Christy, you've got this, the discount challenge.
Yeah.
So I would challenge everyone who's watching this webinar to go do the discount challenge. It's pretty fun. You could, I encourage you guys to do that with any of the team members within the practice and see who gets the better score. Yep. By the way, so it's timed, but kind of a lot of the things that we're talking about, especially, you know, free services, things like that. This is an interesting take on. Take the challenge and see how well you guys do within that. And you'll probably learn a lot that you didn't realize. Even our providers, I had a particular clinic, I just met them, was at an event. They did the discount challenge and they thought that they had their ducks in the row. You know, everything was pretty clean. And they did this particular discount challenge. And then they came to me and they said, oh, crap. We had no idea ultimately. And so I said, all right, well, then let's look at some things and see if ChiroHealthUSA is something that could fix that. And ultimately we did. And they were done with that process just like that. But it made a significant impact on their practice.
And it's true. These are like real life stories of what has happened. And again, because it's a challenge and a competition, it's not really a competition. It's a sweepstakes, I guess. I don't know what to call it. It's giving away $11,181, and that seems like a weird number to be giving away. But
there's a method to that.
Yeah. Not lie. What's the significance of that dollar amount? That's a question. So now you know the answer to at least one question.
Yeah, you will at least get that one. But I mean, do the discount challenge. It takes less than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Just do it. And again, it's interesting when we're at events. We were recently at FCA Nationals, and then we had people coming up, and they're just like, "There's no way." And then it cites the sources too. Mm-hmm. So kudos to Christy though, because she really helped put a lot of that together. And it's a nice wake up call, because it's interesting. The DCs don't tend to score as high as your team members do. Yep. Which I think is you still should know those things,
right?
But those team members, and we work with a lot of team members too, they hands down need to know 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
So Dave, you are only strong as your team. You need the best adjuster in the world. If you don't have an amazing team behind you, then it's going to be real hard to be successful.
Yeah.
But if you have an amazing team, I mean, they will make you. And I will say to you, like, if you go through this process and you have questions about some of the answers, like, and you're concerned, I said, please use private chat if you have specific questions about your practice, so you're not like fessing up to something that you don't want everybody to know. I put that in the chat box, but you can also
tone of silence. Anytime you talk to us, tone of silence.
Right. If you have or you're afraid to ask the question because you're not really sure how to do it privately, I'm going to put Mandy's appointment scheduler in there, and she can help you answer questions and you can click on that and get her an appointment with her, and she can answer questions specific to your practice. Because that's one of the things that's like really hard in a general setting. It's like, well, what do you do? We got to ask some really deep questions about your practice that probably everybody doesn't need to know. So we're going to go back, and a lot of people were on here going, oh my gosh, this was so me before I became a chief provider. I'm a chief provider. I love Heather and Mandy. So I just want to remind you, chief providers, that just because you're chief providers does not get you off the hook on the evaluating your fees on an annual basis. And it's not just your provider contracts, and this is not just you need to evaluate your CHUSA fees. And don't forget to evaluate those, because if you're upping your rates in your practice, even a small, what you feel like is an insignificant amount, you need to check and make sure, because it's going to throw up your percentages. And before you, because we have people who've done this before too, so I always try to send out a notification. Don't forget. But if it's been a couple of years when you thought you were given like a 25% discount, you might be given like a 40% discount at this point.
Yeah.
So make sure you do that. That's available on your resources page. You can also email info@ChiroHealthUSA.com and say, where do I get this fee schedule update worksheet?
Mm-hmm.
So we have a couple of questions. And the first one, Beverly, yes, we will have a replay available. You've registered for this presentation, so it'll be sent to you automatically. This is like super cash compared to how we normally do this.
Beverly, call me.
So is there a guideline for a practice to follow within their county or state when it comes to their actual fees? No, there's not really a guideline, other than you just want to do this on an annual basis. Like, this is more of like a good business practice. Yeah. So you can use those links, like I said, that we've posted in the chat comments. So even those of you who are watching the recording, you'll see those pop up in the comments, because you can see what other people posted. Just click on those links. Start with your cost of doing business or the overhead calculator, because if you don't know how much money you need to make to break even, then you have no idea what you need to be charging.
Right.
Yeah.
So definitely do that first. We recommend having a spreadsheet too, kind of like how they and I'm going to pull this up. So like how they have the code where you have the codes in one column, you put your Medicare fees in another column. And we recommend you use your Medicare fees for everything, because although we do not have parity and it only covers those first three, it's still a good rule of thumb.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are asking, like, what does this mean? So we'll talk about that in a minute. But you're going to put columns in for each of your insurance companies. What is your, what is the market value that you were able to determine if you use ChiroHealthUSA, which is my favorite, not Heather's favorite site. But and put all those in there while you're helping to determine what that good price rate range is for your practice. And don't feel like, too, if you haven't done this in 10 or 15 years, you do not have to raise them to market value overnight.
Oh, there's so many ways that you could ease, I'll say this, have a goal. You know what your number is, and you need to get there. And do you need to just kind of crash everything overnight? Absolutely not. You just kind of take those steps to get to where you ultimately need to be. For sure.
Absolutely. So somebody wants to know where they can get a copy of the contract they signed with the insurance company years ago.
Reach out to their insurance company.
Yeah.
Insurance company, they have to provide you with that.
Mm-hmm.
Reach out to your provider services rep. Simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
They call them, and you may speak to 3 different people and get 3 different answers, but ultimately
they have to provide you with a copy of the contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this question, because this is about, for students, my heart as a future mother of a chiropractic, as a mother of a future chiropractic student. It's been boring. I'm not sure if this is a good question for today's webinar, but how would you give advice for graduating students who are thinking about associating with another doctor? Like, if we should be asking for certain things and be aware of how much salary or hourly we should ask, or other benefits we should ask to see. Also, what are your advice if interested in opening my own place right after graduation? So I love this question. I do. We actually have an article that was written a couple of years ago, which is the advice on 5 things you need to be aware of before joining or opening your own practice. And I have your email address, and I will send that to you. But here's a couple things. One, there's a lot of questions you should be asking before you go into working in a practice. Because if they have compliance issues, you need to be aware of that because you are risking your license before you do that.
Yeah.
What are some things that y'all think they should be asking when they go in here and they are interviewing with a potential practice that they want to work at?
I guess one thing I would say is, what is the term we always say? Like and kind.
Yeah.
Are they
don't clash? I mean, it's a personality thing. I think for sure because you have to you think about yourself. So this is kind of personal, but what are your goals, and do they align with what you want out of the profession, where you want to go, where you want to be? Do they support different hobbies that you've got? I mean, because most chiropractors, let's face it, are entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there's a lot of things. That's for me. If I were in your shoes, I would want to. Yeah, Mandy and I say like and kind. That's a very Mississippi thing. But you want to align yourself with someone who's got the same core values that you've got. You want to associate with good.
And are they going to? I think, and this goes back to our owner and CEO, our boss. Are they going to encourage you to grow?
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to help you with that? If that's one of your goals, to grow as a chiropractor, to, take continuing eds, gain, new techniques and keep up with the, anything new that's coming out and things like that. Are they going to encourage that?
Are you truly going to be part of the team, or are you just going to be another person that clocks in and clocks out?
Yep.
That's a good point. And then also make sure you have a contract in writing and that you read it. We do get phone calls. It's funny. We get a lot of phone calls about nothing that we actually do.
A lot.
That's what we know it like. 9 times out of 10, it's just like, yeah, okay, well, here are a few resources. And, but that goes back to what we said at the very, very beginning. We're just happy to give back to the profession.
We are. So don't think that if it's not related to ChiroHealthUSA, you can't reach out to us because, again, that's like most of the calls come into the office. I teach at a lot of colleges. So a lot of students do have my contact information. And then I get calls that's like they've been working in a practice for 18 months. And now they are on the verge of being sued because they didn't read their contract. They didn't have somebody review the contract. It wasn't a good contract, and they found themselves in a really bad position. Some of the advice that I would give is, one, you need to ask questions to make sure that they are compliance-minded and that you're not risking your license by going to work there. Talk to some of your professors at school. There are people who've been doing, that they've been, helping them get jobs in chiropractic. A lot of the colleges have job fairs. Make sure the person is business minded. Like, how long have they been in business? Are they just looking for somebody because they're one? Reach out to the state association where you're thinking about practicing. They have tremendous resources. Most students' memberships are free or deeply discounted if you're a graduating student to be a part of the association. And then you can utilize those resources in helping you with, again, looking at that contract and then getting their advice about, like, is this a good place for me to work? Why or why not? Like, and getting that feedback. So make sure that you're doing that and definitely seek counsel for that. You want them to be like-minded. You don't want to be butting heads with somebody and be miserable. I tell my kid all the time, when he goes, well, we're like 6 years away from chiropractic school, 7 years away from chiropractic school. We got a ways to go. But we talk about it all the time about like where he'll work. Personally, I don't want him to work on his own right out of the door because he's not done it before. He'll do it in college. He'll work in the student clinic. He'll do his externship. But I want him to work for somebody who is very business-minded, that is very like-minded to him and what he wants. He wants to be very much involved in sports chiropractic. And I have a friend who owns 6 practices that are nowhere near me. But he's a sports chiropractor and he works with athletes, national athletes, college athletes, high school athletes, student athletes, children athletes. And I want my son to work for him because that is going to be a good place for him to be cutting edge, to be able to work with actual athletes and to learn how to do this job. Mm-hmm. But that's a personal preference for me. But I think that you really got to get your feet wet first before you go out there and open up your own business. That's a whole new set of headaches. you know. Somebody said Aetna is the biggest headache in Florida right now. There are a lot of headaches around the country right now.
Cigna too. Cigna, I hear a lot of complaints about Cigna too.
I have 10 emails about Anthem in Virginia right now in my inbox. We get a lot of calls too about PI insurance companies in various parts of the country, Oregon.
Yep. Portland.
Okay, so several people, I'm not showing the screen. So several people asked about the 3 different columns that were on this Chiro code sheet. So the first one is the Medicare fee schedule area for that zip code. And this is Beverly Hills, by the way, in case anybody was asking. In case any of y'all are Beverly Hills 90210. So there are, depending on the consultants and depending on your location, there's a lot of things that factor into it. But a lot of people use a rule of thumb of between 100%. It's usually between 100% of Medicare to 400% of Medicare.
Yeah.
It's somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
So when figuring out what your actual fees are. So Chiro code errs on the side of caution. They do 150 and 200. Obviously,
I'll tell them 150. Look at that as that's your low end.
Mm-hmm.
Low end. And it's crazy how many clinics are way below that. Mm-hmm. And then I say, well, 200, that's your safer. Look at that as that's really what you probably should. And I tell them to round up or round down. It doesn't have to be those exact cents because a lot of clinics don't want to work with that. But 200, there are clinics that we work with, to Christy's point, that go up.
Yeah.
Again, check your workers' comp, PI. I mean, a lot of those things factor into it, but this is a good guideline. This is a really phenomenal guideline. But I'll ultimately, if you're one of those practices that haven't updated in a while, I'll say, why don't you just try to fall between the 150, 200% right now? So you're not shocking people necessarily. Right. And then, again, it's about setting goals and everything for your practice. But those would definitely be the 200% is where I should say that you should be or higher based off of your area.
Yeah. Right. And it really, a lot of it too starts with where are you starting, which is funny because people complain about Medicare being so, like Medicare doesn't pay, but a lot of people, when we look at their fee schedules, are charging less than Medicare in their office. Like, come on, right. So like my brother from another mother, his spreadsheet sometimes goes up to 400%, especially depending on where it's at. In the country. So there's just a lot of things that factor into that, but that's what the 3 column amount, that's what those column amounts are. It's like the starter and then like building it up. Mm-hmm. With the new ENM guidelines, using time primarily as the deciding factors, most DCs will probably be using a higher code for new and established patient consults, evals, etc. How should fees be adjusted accordingly? Do y'all care if I take this one?
Go for it.
Okay, guys, listen. Just because they changed the guidelines does not mean that that's a reason why you should be adjusting your fees. You should be adjusting your fees because they're probably not market value. And yes, I totally agree with you 150%. A lot of people are going to be charging at a higher rate because time is the deciding factor. As you should be. Nobody should have been charging that 01.
01 and 11 gone. January gone. No more. And that's funny because that's a lot of down coding. We see a lot of that's their cash fee. And they'll use the 01 or the 11 for their cash fee. And really they're doing that 03 level of exam. So down coding, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah. Document correctly, code correctly.
So somebody just asked, like, who do they need to talk to if they want to negotiate their fee from insurance? Reach out to provider services.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
We got one more question and then we've gone over, and y'all know I hate when we do that, but this is such a fun conversation. Oh, this is about Medicare Advantage plans. Oh, this is such a question. Amanda, this is a question for Evan. I'm going to send it to him, and I'll get you an answer. Not until my do not disturb expired.
Well, this has been fun. This has been fun. We've really appreciated everybody kind of tuning in. And if you've got questions, concerns, whatever that is, Christy's got our contact information. Set an appointment with Mandy, your network specialist, or this is not about ChiroHealthUSA. A lot of you guys are with ChiroHealthUSA, but we genuinely are just here to help, and we're happy to do it.
Yeah, most of all of you would have to agree. 2020 has been a nightmare for everyone in itself. So truly, our goal more than ever. Not that we always haven't helped, but now more so than ever, we want to just be able to help you guys and offer any resources you need.
Absolutely. And I just put the link in there for the appointment with Mandy. And you can click on that, and it gives you access to her calendar. Sorry, everything's going off now. It's like, woo. So we'll get that. And again, Amanda, I just copied I'm going to copy you on an email to Evan, and we'll get that in for you. So I just want to thank y'all so much for being a part of the webinar series today and for hanging in there for like a whole 6 minutes over the time. Just remember that we do not have a webinar next week, for it's Turkey Day week. And hopefully you're going to be getting some R&R because you absolutely deserve it after this insane couple of months. But we will pick right back up on December the 1st on how to host your own podcast with Jim Chester, the largest chiropractic podcast, ChiroHealthUSA. And this ought to be fun, to say the least, because he is a real person and I just love him. But we're going to learn all about how to host our own podcast. That's a scary thought. Could you imagine if we had a podcast?
I think we should.
We should. Yeah.
Well, we'll learn about it on December 1st along with you guys. So it's not posted on the website, but it will be on there this afternoon because Jim just got back from Mexico, speaking to Mexican chiropractors. So we'll be having it we'll post it on the website this afternoon. You'll get an email about it next week. So make sure you register. And we will see y'all next time. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.